for coming. We're very excited to kick off our first seminar this semester. We're very excited to have Richard Akresh here. I'm very happy to introduce him. He is my former PhD advisor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So all the good research skills I have is due to him, and all the bad ones are due to my other research advisors.
Households are facing that the government might be able to help them out. Again, so we're going to, families in these environments maybe don't have the right information or don't have enough information, aren't sure what to do. And so we're talking about a very basic set of information about health for their kids, about nutrition, about breastfeeding, about vaccinations, about really basic levels of information. And families may not know that. Right? And so therefore, maybe if you provide information to them, they might be able to improve their kids' outcomes. Alternatively, there's been a movement in the last couple of years, in particular in Africa, kind of driven by the stuff that was in Jamaica, 30 years ago. The Heckman follow-up on these home visits, kind of focusing on the quality of parenting behaviors. So thinking about, maybe, teaching parents how to be better parents might be really important. It could be an information component, but it also could be more about like how do How do you design, how do you improve kids' cognitive development? And so right now we're in this world where governments and NGOs are kind of just throwing everything, kind of the kitchen sink approaches is what we refer to it, kind of doing a little of everything. And so what we wanted to start to think about in this project is like, are there ways to understand, whether certain components, adding certain components to an integrated social safety net, is that effective or not? So if we have some cash baseline, if we do some additional things, do we get better outcomes? If we don't, well, maybe that's not a good approach. Okay, so and then in particular, trying to what components matter. We can't do everything. We can't, that's not feasible. We don't have the budget to do everything. So what we're going to focus on in this project, right, is whether thinking about having a baseline of cash transfers and then adding on information meetings at the village level and then adding on home visits, right, in an integrated social safety net, do they remove these barriers for change and improve child development? Then in particular and specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to have, if we have cash transfers and we add on village level information meetings, does that improve their effectiveness? So does the, removing the barrier of information, was that actually the constraint that mattered? Actually, we're giving you cash and now we're going to give you information on top of it. Okay. And likewise, if we add home visits on top of that, now you got information, you got cash, you got information, and you got a home visit where we reinforce these messages, does that improve things? And then importantly, do these effects last once the intervention ends? Okay, so like the end, we have some pilot, we're going to run the project for 2.5 years, and then we're going to stop and we're going to go back and see what happened. We'll tell you kind of why we can answer certain questions and we can't answer other questions. Let me set up what the project is, what the RCT is. This is a randomized control trial in Burkina Faso, working with the government, okay, rural parts of the country. It's kind of an integrated social safety net. There were 225 villages, and they were split up into 5 treatment arms, or 5 arms. Okay, on the far right here, we have there's a control group, they get nothing. Okay, so that's kind of like life as usual. Like, they're just operating their village. These are very poor villages. These are very poor families. This is kind of in your mind, you should be thinking about rural subsistence farmers living in mud hut, straw roof, no electricity, no running water. Most kids, maybe only half the kids are going to school. So this is a very, very poor environment. Okay, so that's kind of the background underlying standard. And then over here, we'll start with a set of villages that are going to receive a cash transfer only. Okay, they're going to get quarterly payments from the government, and they can do whatever they want with those payments. Okay, we're going to have another set of villages that are going to be randomly determined or randomly allocated to the second arm, where they're going to get these cash transfers, but they're also going to get monthly village level meetings. Okay.
We have like village councils before the meetings take place.
So we have village what?
Councils, like existing councils.
I mean, so there's a chief in the village. There's like an advisory committee. There's some community organization. So there's some community infrastructure the government set up over a couple of decades, last 2 decades. So there's some decentralization of the government at that level, but it's not necessarily providing information.
The reason why I ask that is because there's the information meetings actually make them like does it create the social organization that was lacking?
I mean, based on what we'll see as the results of the information, no. The information doesn't do anything. So that's the kind of the negative effect. The information doesn't do anything. So given it doesn't do anything, it didn't make it more collective.
And what is when exactly was this program implemented? And
give me like one slide and we'll get to it. Okay, so we got cash only, cash plus information, and the third group is going to get cash plus information, those other information, and then we're going to have home visits that are focused on just the health component. So we have a series of themes about health and focus on that. The fourth one will be cash plus information plus home visits, where they're going to be focusing on a health message plus a parenting and cognitive development for your child. So kind of a psychosocial development with, singing songs to your kid, telling stories, saying like, hey, this is a computer. Hey, this is a rock. Hey, this is a tree. Hey, this is brown. This is green. Like those kinds of things with the kid. In all the analysis, we'll lump these two together for power issues. In the field, we're not 100% sure they actually delineated between the messages. And so just for analysis, we'll lump them together. So that's the kind of cash plus info plus home visit. That's the theme going through. All right. So let me kind of highlight these 3 main contributions we're going to make. So this is one of the first papers to look at, to evaluate an RCT of an intermittent social safety net, focused on giving cash plus information plus home visits in the same setting. There are some other parts, most closely related, probably a paper in northern Nigeria, where they also did this kind of kitchen sink approach. They can't separate out the home visits from the information there. So it's a little bit, we're going to be able to say kind of it's not information driving things. They've got everything lumped in kind of, they got everything or they got nothing. So there are some differences there. Second point, it kind of is what I said, is kind of separating out cash plus information plus home visits, which components might matter. And then this last point is really important. So as I said earlier, we're going to be focusing on these medium-term effects of the program. So the program ends, the intervention can't stop, the information meeting stop, home visits stop. Then there's ideally, in an ideal world, we would have come back right then and done an endline survey. But because of insecurity in parts of Burkina Faso, right, and because of COVID, which COVID messed up a lot of things in the field for a lot of people, right? So we basically had to delay the endline survey for about 15 months. So what we have, when we're looking at all these results, we've got an intervention, baseline. We do the intervention for, 2.5 years. It stops, 15 months elapse, and then we come back. So when we don't find effects for this outcome or that outcome, I can't tell you if there were effects at the end line and they faded out. And lots of programs show that effects fade out when the money stops, right? Or if there were never any effects on that outcome. It's kind of a major limitation. And insecurity is like, it is what it is. We can't do anything about it. But we will still find effects, which is like amazing given it's 15 months after the event.
There's a minor point on the second, minor comment on the second point. It's not really cash versus information versus home visits.
Correct.
It's just
cumulative. So we'll have a set of specifications where we'll look at the cash only versus the cash plus information plus the cash plus information plus home visits. We'll look at those things. We also have a specification, what we refer to as kind of a cumulative specification. And so how much does adding on information get you above cash? How much does adding on home visits above cash plus info get you? So in that sense, we can back out how much more does a home visit get you above cash plus information. We cannot answer the question, how much does a home visit alone matter?
Yeah.
So that's a, but in in this environment where like the government just want to do everything and they wanted to do cash, they didn't want to try, they want, and so we can say, okay, if you have cash as a baseline, which a lot of governments believe is the right way to do it, and you start adding on things, what do you get?
Yeah.
And in terms of budgetary aspects, you'll be able to say something about like, when you think about, given now, of course, you can't separate it out, but in some sense, that would be interesting to, if say you would get the same return in terms of home visits without a cash grant also, and then you would be interested in kind of understanding, in terms of budgetary considerations, what would be more long-term sustainable for the government in some sense.
It's a great question. So there's 2 points. The first point is we have we're in progress to doing a full cost benefit analysis. Okay, I was talking with my co-author last night. We are not done. So I'll blame my co-author. I'll throw him under the bus here now. And so we don't have numbers on the cost benefit calculation. Maybe in a couple of weeks we'll have that, but today I don't have numbers. But it's obviously where we're going. We want to see, cost benefit calculation. The second point is, future research based on what we see here should clearly be thinking, hey, can we set up a program where we do the home visits, but we don't give the cash? That clearly should be a next research project. So if there's someone in the audience who's working with governments who are interested in this, who want an RCT, you can randomize, you have funding, definitely, call me up and we're interested in talking.
Yeah.
So what's the outcome again?
Kind of health and education for kids. I'll get, it's a wide range of outcomes, but yeah, we'll get into that. Okay.
But the cash is unconditional, right? So there's
It's unconditional. Yeah. Okay, so let me give you an overview of the results, and then we'll jump into the specific details that we're focusing on. Okay, so if we're looking at this, we're going to see the biggest effects for this cash plus information plus home visit arm. Okay, and again, medium-term effects. Right. So now we're going to look at a bunch of different categories. Within each category, we'll have a whole bunch of variables in each. So each of these red categories will be a table, and then within the table, there's a whole bunch of outcomes. So we're going to look at fertility and pregnancy. We'll see fewer pregnancies when they're getting these cash and from home visits. It's a big issue in sub-Saharan Africa. Governments are trying to reduce fertility. We're talking about families having 5 or 6 kids per woman. So these are big families. More medically assisted, using midwives, using doctors, and going to health clinics to have the births. We're seeing improvements in health behaviors, improved child nutrition, more use of bed nets, mosquito bed nets, more prenatal visits, increased hand washing after using the latrine, or increased hand washing before you're cooking, which is important. Behavioral changes to lead to improved outcomes. We see some big effects on education. So looking at more likely to be enrolled in school, more likely to getting more years of schooling, improved grade progression from one grade to the next. Okay.
Sorry, but the home visits, do you think the story is more like discipline for the discipline the parents, or is it more like providing information to parents?
It's a great question. The short answer is I have no idea. If I'm being like totally honest, I have no idea. We have some hypotheses. We can rule out some things, but there's a whole range of hypotheses that it's like we think it could be these 2 or 3 or 4 different things, and we're a little bit limited on kind of what we can say, like why do the home visits matter, right? And we'll have a whole slide of like I'll show you the results, and I'll have a slide of like, hey, let's talk about why we think it mattered.
And you will give us a bit more detail on what is the information and that's
exactly. Yep, exactly. Okay, so then on the early child development stuff, we see some kind of mixed input, mixed outcomes. We have 2 basic measures. One is a strengths and difficulties test, a psychological assessment where they have 25 questions about different things the kid might be facing. And we see some improvements of these cash flows informational home, but only on some subsections. Like there's a pro-social section of questions, and we see improvements on that, but not on the entire section. Okay, and then we have a Denver assessment. So this is asking questions about gross motor, fine motor, language acquisition, and personal social. And there we find nothing. Okay, so we don't see any impacts on that. So there's kind of, overall, kind of a mixed bag on early childhood. It's not wildly successful on the CCD. It's not nothing that lasts, but it's certainly not, wildly successful. Within these 2 things, it is really the home visits that are driving, we see this cumulative effect of adding the home visits gets you matters more, but overall on the package, it's not a big effect. Okay. We see some effects of cash only. Information is just, it's a null, like we get nothing on information. Okay, so adding information to cash gets you nothing on any outcome. In fact, in a couple of them, it actually makes it worse off, which is a puzzle we don't really have a solution for. Okay, so what I'll do here, I'll probably skip a bunch of this end stuff. We'll talk about the pilot in detail, give you some ideas what we're doing, talk about the data a little bit. I'll go through the results. We'll spend a bunch of time talking about these mechanism puzzles and kind of get some feedback from all of you. I probably won't have any time to kind of talk about attrition and fidelity. Like everything we did what we said we were going to do, and it was good. There's some interesting heterogeneity, but that's for another time. And then the cost benefit analysis I told you about. All right. So here's the amounts here's the components. There's 3 components of the integrated social safety net. The first is that these transfer amounts paid quarterly. This is a lot of money in a rural setting. So this is about $60, $60 to $80 per quarter. So yeah, $240. These guys are making, we have very imprecise numbers on income because these are rural subsistence farmers. So it's, they don't have a wage, they don't have a W-2 form. Like there's nothing like obvious there. So they're estimating agricultural output, and they sold some livestock. And so it's hard to get a number, but it's probably on the order of about $600 to $1,000, somewhere in that range. So these are big chunks. These are anywhere between 20% to maybe as much as 50% of. So these are a huge cash amount. Information meetings are basically quarterly village sessions where the whole village is involved, that they're invited out. And then the monthly meetings for groups of 25 to 30 moms. These monthly meetings each month, I'll show you when I get to the slide, but we'll have a different theme for each month. So one month we'll be talking about breastfeeding. 1 month we'll be talking about vaccinations. 1 month we'll be talking about hand washing. We'll be talking about nutrition for when you should transition from breastfeeding to solid foods. When kind of a bed net use for family planning. Kind of a whole range of information sessions about health, and then ECD stuff talking about talking to your kids, singing songs to your kids, playing with your kids, those kinds of things. Don't hit your kid. Kind of all kinds of things along that mention kind of a health side and a early childhood development. And these home visits will be provided twice a month by the same worker. Will come and visit you in your home, spend about an hour kind of talking to you. Hey, this month we talked about bed nets. I noticed you don't have a bed net in your house. You know, what happened? You know, you got the money. Why don't you have a bed net? Oh, well, my husband took it and sold it. Or, oh, well, he's using it to fish, or whatever the story is. You know, why aren't you, why don't we talk about soap at the latrines, and why don't you use soap at the latrines? Right? Kind of trying to get this.
The sessions, are they like voluntary or?
Yeah, I mean, everything's voluntary. I mean, so if you don't want to go, life is voluntary, right? You get the money quarterly and that's it. And then, you know, we come, I mean, it's a big deal, right? It's, you got people from the government, from the capital showing up in these rural villages in the middle of nowhere. And we actually think on these home visits, you know, this one of the hypotheses earlier about like why these home visits matter was that, you know, I think the salience of, we've talked to some of these people, like informal, like qualitative, just discussions with some of these families. And they've said to us that, like, look, you know, here I am, poor nothing out in the village, and this government person is coming from the capital out to my village, sitting in my household, sitting on the floor on a rug or mat, you know, in my mud house, telling me how to make my kid healthier and happier and more successful in life. And it's like really, really powerful for these families.
Do you have information on the cost of, say, you know, schooling and distance to schools, costs of services, things that this cash transfer might actually help to address?
Yeah, so we have information on distance to schools. Not every village will have a school, but most will, but not every, at the primary, we're talking primary schooling here. Most will have a school. Costs are probably, from another project, it was on the order of 4,000, so $8 a year per kid. So it's cheap, but it's not zero. Healthcare you have to pay for to see a doctor or to get medicines, but it also is relative. It could be, you know, 20 cents, 30 cents, you know, so it's cheap, but not, again, not zero. So it's important. Not zero is really important because, you know, the cash could in theory affect that stuff a lot.
And typically these meetings were then held in the language of the catchment area.
Yeah, so they're all in local language. You know, very few people would be speaking French is a colonial language. Very few people speaking French. Everything's in the local language. You know, but based on, you know, what we were talking about earlier, you could be a minority group in that village who mainly don't understand, which is why the home visit. It's another hypothesis why the home visit mattered, but the village information didn't. You got the information in the village level. You might be a minority group. You don't have enough power to really tease that out to see if that's the story. It's a cool story if it is, it's a hypothesis, but I can't for sure know that.
The homes are done by the local bureaucrats or they like from?
No, from outside. Yeah, they were training. So basically, the way the structure works is the government was hiring NGOs, was contracting with NGOs to hire kind of people in that environment who can speak the local language, but not from that village. So maybe they come from the regional capital or the district capital, something along that. They're probably a little more educated, went through a full training for a couple months to learn, you know, the information meetings, the home visit, like what you're doing and all that stuff. So, but they're not, you know, they're not PhD economists or, you know, something, PhD social worker, nothing like at that level. Yeah. Okay. Everything looks good. I'm not going to show you based on randomization, looks good. Attrition, here's a big issue to keep in mind. So because of insecurity in the country, right, when we had a baseline, we had 225 villages, you saw the nice setup of the randomization and all that. Unfortunately, you know, insecurity, when we came back to do the end line, there was problems in, you know, basically one of the two problems we were working was we lost an entire region that we couldn't go back to. And then even in the region we were in, kind of on the eastern side of that region, we just couldn't go to the villages. So there are basically 74 villages out of the 225 that we were able to go back to. So it's a massive, you know, huge hit in terms of, you know, we're losing 2/3 of the sample, which was a massive hit. Now, having said that, things do look balanced. We do a bunch of attrition checks and things across these villages, no differential attrition between what the 74 villages we got back to in the different arms versus the ones we couldn't get back to. Things look balanced, but it's a major caveat that we, you know, we want to be upfront and straightforward with you about it.
So the villages like sparsely located, or it's like more like tightly community or?
No, it's kind of spread. So you kind of like normally in this setting, you'd have a house, your fields, a house, your fields, a house, your fields, and then kind of we're all kind of close-ish, and we'd have some fields around it, and 3 kilometers that way would be another village, 5K that way, and 10K that way. And so. Okay.
So
Also, the truth.
within a village, everyone is sampled, right? Like
No, so we do 20, no, on average, it's about 200 households per village, and we sampled 21.
Is that a sample or is that, or is it determined by the eligibility of four?
No, it's a sample.
It's a sample.
Yeah, I mean, we basically did some power calculations and said, okay, we need, 21 villages, 21 households per village.
Okay.
So it's a small, it's 10% of the village that we're sampling.
But you didn't collect data to estimate spillover.
We did not. We try on a different project, we tried to do that, and like it was so wildly imprecise in the measuring. We're like, okay, we're not even gonna try and do that on this project. Okay, attrition, once we got back to those 74 villages, we didn't lose very many households. Right, so we lost a ton of households because of insecurity. We lost a ton of villages because of insecurity. If we got back to these 74 villages, we found almost everyone. And this is, 4 years later, right? 2.5 years of intervention, and then a year in and change on, till we could go back to them. Okay, here's the timing. Spring 2018, we did the baseline survey. Cash transfer started right after that. In June 2018, they ran all the way for 2.5 years. There was a delay in getting out the information meetings and the home visits. This was kind of the government was working with us and basically said, okay, we're ready to do cash now, we're going. I'm like, wait, what about information and home visits? They're like, nope, well, we got to get cash out and we'll get to your silly ideas on the side later. And so, it took them a year to find the workers, train them, so it was a good, so again, there's a challenge, right? We got cash for 2.5 years. We've got a year and a half of 2019, and a year and a half of home visits and information. And so we can say like, okay, well, there's so many problems with the issue, with the intervention, which like is true, right? That's true. On the other hand, this is a pure RCT working with the government at scale in villages run by the government, doing all the stuff that governments sometimes do. Like there's delays, there's implementation issues. Like, this is a real program that we are not controlling like every single lever on this thing, right? Which has its advantages, right? Because that's like this is the real world, and we still get some stuff. It's not like we're working with an NGO like in Western Kenya where, some folks can run an NGO and that NGO does exactly what those researchers tell them to do, okay?
Why did the intervention end in December 2020?
It was supposed to be a 2-year intervention. So it was supposed to go June 2018 to June 2020. COVID stopped everything, things were delayed starting in March, April. So there were some delays in getting that quarterly transfer. Then it came later, and so then they kind of just added 6 months onto it and called it good. So COVID messed things up. They kind of adjusted at the end, and so.
Was there an election during this period?
Was there what?
Was there an election during this period? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know that we can kind of talk about that stuff in some of these settings. All right, so let's get into the data. I mean, 200 households per village. There's that, only 15% have a health clinic in the village. It's about 5K to the nearest health clinic, about just under 5K to the nearest market. 90% have a primary school, so not quite everyone, but a big chunk of it. Only 20% have a secondary school. 6K to the nearest secondary school. So to kind of give you some flavor, there's a lot of primary schools. There's not so many health clinics. Health clinics kind of cover a broader range of villages. Okay. All right, I won't go through household characteristics. This is a straight, I'll kind of put this up real briefly. So we're looking at, some outcome. We'll control for baseline values of that outcome. And then we'll have a treatment arm for the cash only, a variable for cashless information, and a variable for cashless information for home visits. We'll cluster standard errors at the unit of randomization, which is the village. We'll do a couple of things to, kind of econometrically, we'll create these clean cats and Lehman indices to kind of aggregate outcomes in a table in a family to kind of say like, hey, we've got lots of outcomes. I don't want to just focus on one outcome here, significant or the other. So we'll kind of try and be, honest about that. And then we'll kind of evaluate, adjust the standard errors for, randomization inference as well. Question.
So the villages, are they still farming or?
Are they what?
Subsistence farming?
Yes. Yeah, then this whole setting, rural subsistence farmers, 95% are subsistence farmers. The others are kind of small merchants in the village, maybe, but it's like they're selling crops or vegetables or.
They don't move from their households.
No, Yeah. Okay. We also, this cumulative specification, which depending on the outcome, I might show you, but is basically, did you get cash or are you in the T1, 2, 3, or 4? These guys all got cash. Then what's the cumulative effect of getting an additional information meeting that's only in T2, 3, and 4 because they got information? And then what's the additional effect of getting a home visit if you're in T3 and 4? So there we can look at, I don't know if I have the pointer. Yeah. So here we can look at, the beta 3 is like, this is the cumulative on top of getting cash plus information. How much does, home visits add on top of that? Okay. So we'll look at, here's kind of the summary of the results, right? We'll look at, here, these are all the indices from each of the main tables. Okay, and so each, here's the coefficients for the cash only arm, here's the coefficients for cash plus information, and there's the cash plus information plus home visits. Okay, and so what we'll see, each, focus on here, pregnancy index, that's the red square. Okay, you can see there's a small positive insignificant effect on this index of a bunch of pregnancy-related outcomes if you do the cash-only arm, if you do the cash plus information, but there's a huge positive effect if you do the cash plus information plus home visits. And so we're looking at that red square there. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's kind of how we're thinking about this table. And each of these numbers, that number will come out from a table I'll show you with a bunch, there's 5 or 6 or 7 columns of each of those outcomes, and that's an index then of those, however many outcomes it is. Okay, so what we'll see here, focusing on the cash plus information plus home visits, we see big effects on pregnancy index, health behavior changes. We don't really see much on anthropometrics, which was, disappointing. But 15 months after the cash and information and home visits ended, the kids look just like the control group, right?
And the cash is also ended.
Everything ended.
Everything ended.
Everything ended.
It's not like an ongoing cash program.
Nope, everything ended. We do see effects on education. So these kids, 6 to 15 years old, we see effects on the continuing. And here's the ECD stuff. So on the Denver index, like I said, there's no significant effects. We do see some effects on the strengths and difficulties measures. So that's kind of this mixed. There is some early child development. It's not wildly successful. It's only some subcomponent.
One quick question.
Yeah.
The pregnancy index. So here the target is a woman who's already a mother.
So the target of the sample is households who had kids under 5 or a pregnant woman.
Right. But then the outcomes are measured for everyone in the household where it's relevant, like pregnancy, like if there's a,
in this case, it was the pregnant mother or mothers with kids 0 to 4. Like each table had a slightly different sample that we were looking at. But I'll kind of show you the regressions we're looking at outside of it. Is there a question back? Okay. Here, if you look at the cash plus info, you can see kind of most of the effect. There's nothing going on. There is some effect of education there, that's statistically significant, and everything else is kind of close to 0. We do see some effects of cash on education here and on the strengths and difficulties, but again, not a whole lot of movement on the cash only or cash plus information. So adding information doesn't get you much more. I was really surprised. We thought maybe talking to people, we don't set it up this way for because we're stupid. We kind of talk to people and when we're talking to people in the villages, they didn't know this stuff. And the health people tell us this stuff is really important. And then we tell these people this health stuff, and it didn't really matter. It didn't move. Or if it did move, 15 months later, it didn't stick.
Yeah, in fact, strangely enough, like you were mentioning, they seem to even go in the wrong direction.
A couple of times it does. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. Okay. So here's some of the tables. I won't go through in a ton of detail, but so we can start out first looking at the age at each pregnancy for the woman. Are we kind of delaying the first pregnancy, second pregnancy? Are you kind of adding family planning into this process? And we'll see, with the cash plus info plus home visits, these coefficients are all positive, mostly statistically significant, increasing how many years later are you delaying that pregnancy. Okay. The second row under the coefficients are the standard errors, and then the square brackets are the randomization p inference. So we can these are p values, these are standard errors. So this is significant at the 10% and 5%, and that's kind of how we interpret this. Okay. And we see an actual drop in over this 4-year time period from baseline to endline. We see a drop in how many times these women in these households were pregnant. So this, like, the government is super excited about, seeing these family planning effects actually coming in, but only, right? I mean, we can see, and it's not even like it's not like it's close but imprecisely measured. It's like close to zero, and then that's quite big, and the cash is also close to zero. These are big differences across these arms. And then improvements in medically assisted birth. So going to the health clinic, having a midwife there, a trained midwife helping with the birth improvements.
And in the second column, how should I indicate a medically assisted birth?
Yep.
The control group mean is 96% of the mothers that are having medically.
Exactly.
Wow.
Most are going to the clinic. Now we're lumping together, like there's very few like MDs, doctors,
but
it's mostly traditional, midwives, trained midwives. But we are seeing an improvement. Basically, like if you're in the home visit, like almost 100% are basically going now to, so it's
pretty high in the case,
exactly.
Why do we expect to see impacts on fertility just on the cash round, right? If you give me more money, I probably, I'm happy to have
more kids.
Right?
No, for sure.
It's probably not surprising that there's no impact. Just
For sure. On the cash, I don't really have much to say on that.
And
On the information, I definitely do, because like the government was saying like family planning was one of the themes being taught in the information units. Right, so I think the real puzzle is this 0.02 versus minus 0.29. That's the real puzzle.
I mean, it could be like, you're visiting, and then if you have kids around, and then there might be like some shame or guilt, like, you're being taught all these things, and then you're not practicing. So parents probably would have less children when the house being visited, like
Maybe.
twice.
Like that's a totally reasonable hypothesis. I can't prove it. You can't prove it either. So that's the problem that we're facing, right?
Is childbearing restricted to married couples?
In this context, it will be married couples. It doesn't have to. We didn't require it, but in this setting, it's all married couples. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we kind of talked through all this. I won't say that. So look at the health stuff. So here's the different health topics. I won't kind of skim through that. These are the information themes that were being taught, right? And so compliance with getting the right number of prenatal visits, exclusive breastfeeding, nutrition stuff, food groups, diversity of food groups, the diet of the pregnant woman, malaria issues, how to prevent malaria, iron supplementation at birth, things like that. And then on the ECD stuff, feeding the sick child, hygiene, family planning, how if the kid has diarrhea, what you should be doing, kind of a whole range of health and water hygiene, food hygiene, and so forth. All right, so on the first pass, we'll have kind of two panels, right? So this is the first set of outcomes. On this set of outcomes, we don't really see a whole lot. This is looking at a child. Do they get vitamin A when they're at the prescribed as a baby? Do they get iron? Does the mother get her vitamins? Is it prenatal? And we don't really see much. It's vaccination. We don't see anything. There should have been stuff here. Like these are themes that were taught during the health sessions, during the information sessions. We see nothing on the information, the cash with information, and we see one coefficient here on the home visit, but like nothing else.
How does access to these items? Is it like accessible to a market or?
Yes, you kind of have to go to the health clinic. So we kind of try to split it up. Like if you have a health clinic closer or further, we don't really see much there. We look if you have a health clinic in your village versus not. We don't have a power to differentiate. That was kind of the first hypothesis we had. The next step we want to do is like maybe not in your village, but kind of close-ish. And so you might walk a little bit, but it's to see if there's something to get a little more power. But kind of the two arms, I think, is 85-15 is the split. So we're kind of really underpowered in the 15% that has a clinic.
These are all self-reported, right?
Everything here is self-reported.
Some of these control group means are also pretty high, right? Like mother gets iron and mother gets 85%.
Yeah, the mother stuff is pretty high. I mean, the child is 50%. The vaccinations 50%. So that's not. There's a lot of room for movement on that.
On the mother side, it seems like there's good prenatal sort of.
Yep.
Going on.
Yep. So here's the second part of this table. And now for these outcomes, we do see, like, so I'm kind of showing you like, hey, here's all the themes we asked, right? And we see some movement on some outcomes, but we don't see movement on everything. I don't know why we don't see it on everything. That's a puzzle. So here we see it on using a bed net, on diversity of the food group, mother washing their hands after the toilet or before feeding, reductions in illness or no diarrhea in the last month, increased number of prenatal visits, and then kind of an index across all 15 columns in the previous table of this. So overall, cash plus information plus home visits lead to an improvement in health behavior. Cash and information do nothing. Cash alone does nothing as well.
And did you, I just was curious, like, but like, did you also ask people like, what do they use this cash trans that they get for, or?
No, it's kind of a weird, like in previous studies, it's a weird question,
Yeah, I guess.
because they're going to tell you like, I use it for good things and I use it. So this is the best, like, do you know these things? You do these things. On the next slide, summary help, we just kind of went through that. Here's the anthropometrics. So here we're actually measuring heights and weights and arm circumferences for these children. Okay, and we'll see that, again, it's like we see some effect in cash plus information home visits, but only on arm circumference. It's positive, it's not statistically significant. This could be our power issue. Maybe there was something on the weights, weight for age scores, but we're just underpowered to do it. We actually see some negative effects here. No clue what's going on there.
Very strange, no?
Yeah, that's kind of really bizarre. Again, like I don't want to, like I said earlier, I don't want to focus on just one outcome in any of the tables. So, if we go over to our index, cash has a positive insignificant effect, negative insignificant effect for cash plus information, positive insignificant, like there's just not really much there on, weights, arm circumference, and heights overall.
In terms of like the heights, do you measure children or do you measure like just adults?
No, it's a kid 0 to 59 months. Okay. Education, all right, so now looking at, here we're looking at enrollment, your schooling, any schooling completed, and progression from grade to grade, and then the index at the end. And here, along the top row, we see this pattern, like, we have lots of evidence like cash improved education. We have 1 million RCTs out there. We see evidence that, consistent here as well. We see, again, also big effects from, in some cases, slightly larger effects than cash alone, but not wildly different, right? But, cash plus information plus home will just have these education impacts. All right, we kind of went through those summaries. Here's the ECD. So I'll kind of walk you through the two different measures that we used for getting early childhood development. The first was the strengths and difficulties, where they asked 25 different items across 5 scales that they refer to. So there's an emotional problems, conduct problems, hyperactivity, peer problems, and a pro-social scale. And each of those has 5 different questions, like, for emotional problems, does your kid get angry? Does he throw temper tantrums? And it's a yes, sometimes, which is never kind of thing. And then you add these up, or not true, somewhat true, certainly true, and then you add them up and you get a score across these 5 items. And we've tried all kinds of stuff about looking at different subcomponents, looking at every question separately. And kind of this is the cleanest, most aggregate way to look at it. Like there's some results there, but not a ton. And the Denver on the bottom is looking at kind of gross motor, fine motor, language, and personal social. And again, it's things like, you'll come in, the enumerator will work with the mom and the kid, and like, hey, can you pick up a pebble with your pincer? Right? The Denver is based on certain ages. So like, if you were 0 to 6 months, you should be doing these things. If you're 6 to 9 months, you should be doing this. If you're 12 to 18 months, like each set of age ranges should do different things. So like, on fine motor, can you pick up things? Can you stand and walk? Can you crawl? Can you run? Can you jump? Like, language at certain ages, you should be able to say mama, dada. Can you say words, 2 sentences, 3 sentences? To each, these are a psychological test. And we're just going to see, we're going to see nothing. So here's the strengths and difficulties. We'll start with that. We do see something, the total score, whether we do the Z-scores and this average range, there's just nothing going on. That one subcomponent on the pro-social, So there's 4 things that are bads and 1 good. So the 4 dimensions of bads, like we don't see any improvement in, improving the tantrums and those kinds of things. We do see some improvement on the pro-social, those 5 questions related to the pro-social stuff. And here's Denver, kind of a whole range of not much going on. Here's the total score. We don't see anything going on there. Here's the 4 subcomponents. There's not really much going on there. Certainly nothing significant.
Sorry, to go back, when you're looking at the anthropometric things, if you look at them by the age of the child in the sense of like people who are born post the cash transfer start.
Yep.
I mean, there's no clear, very strong evidence on how important when you intervene is. Do you see some heterogeneity by age of months?
Short answer, we're underpowered to answer that. I mean, so, we split it by boy, girl, by younger, older, by, first 12 months, first 24 months. Like, we just don't have enough kids in each cell across these different arms to really, statistically, there's, we don't have the power. So we're kind of limited on it. Okay. Denver, let me just show you what the cumulative looks like here. So this is now looking at the Denver where I'm showing this cumulative citation where you just get, if you got cash, that's all 4 treatments, right? We see nothing. If you add on info, it doesn't change much. But if then you add in home visits on top of that, we see some pretty big, effects on the ECD, both on the total score and all of the subcomponents. Okay, so that's kind of saying, hey, the home visits matter, right? But overall, if we just do campus and home visits, we're not going to get a positive effect. But that home visit is important in this whole integrated component, right? So it implies, thinking hard about like what's the next research question that we want to be thinking about and trying to set up. Okay, we said all that. Okay, so we'll see how do we do on time?
15 minutes.
15. Okay. So there are a bunch of early childhood development topics that both for the information sessions and the home visits, right? And so we then ask questions on the survey about did you do X, Y, and Z? And it's a kind of a whole bunch of they didn't do any of it. So we asked about like the government was important to them to improve registration of children and birth certificates, like when the kid's born, bring them to the health center to get their birth certificate, giving affection to kids, providing a recreational environment, increasing the number of toys they have, like, and doesn't necessarily mean you buy Legos, fancy toys, and there's like, they have a rock and sticks and, like that kind of, and we ask, culturally appropriate questions to try and measure that. And we're going to get kind of a whole bunch of nothing. Protecting children from dangerous situations, saving a child first, and then, teaching children to be more sharing of their stuff.
Does children in this case like work to help the parents?
Yes, but not at 0 to 5. So yes, kids certainly 6 and up, they're helping, maybe it's taking care of babysitting the younger kid, maybe it's getting firewood with the mom, maybe it's out in the field, 6 to 10, I don't know if you have kids, but 6 to 10-year-olds are not super efficient and effective at doing stuff. As you get older, even I have teenage boys, even then they're not, they need a lot of reminding about what they need to do to, kind of do there's a chore list and like, it's of course way quicker for me to just do the chore than to get them to do the chore. So, all right. So here's these are the different ECD things. So the pro-social, like this is the column we saw earlier from the strengths and difficulties. We do see effects there, but then all the other stuff that was taught in the information, like we get nothing. There's increase the number of toy categories, reducing whether the child was injured, whether they have a birth certificate, are the parents spending more time interacting with them? This is actually interesting. Like, this negative coefficient. Again, I don't want to make too much about one column, but it is negative. We do think there was some crowding out. Like these parents got, again, anecdotally, the parents got cash and then planted another quarter hectare of peanuts or millet or something. And they're busy and have time to do these stupid tell stories to your kid and sing songs to them. They're working, right? And so, I don't know how much emphasis I want to put on that, but and then this child development cost. There's just not much going on what we were teaching. Okay, so here's the mechanism. I'll spend a few minutes on this. So kind of you've seen the results now, right? And so thinking about these puzzles that we're seeing of like why are cache and information home visits so effective? Right? So we're trying to the kind of the hypotheses, the running hypothesis we have are thinking about, the one I mentioned already, the salience, right? This idea that, the government cares about you and your children and comes to your household and it's kind of like, hey, we've got to, here's what we can do to help your kid get, healthier and better, brain development and succeed in life and that kind of stuff. We see some evidence of that. The only real evidence we have pointing to that is we have some, when we run the regressions for the treatment arm where you did a home visit based on health and the treatment arm where you did the home visit based on health plus parenting, we basically see the same effects. So that's suggestive evidence, right? That the information content during the home visit didn't really matter. It's not definitive, I don't want to, it's not the hill I'm going to die on here today, right? But it's suggestive that, that stuff might matter. Like it's something about coming to your household more than what I'm doing when I'm at your household. That may be evidence that salience is part of it.
So how long was this visit like?
About an hour. The key thing though, so it could be, the parents go to the information meeting. Maybe there's a language thing we were talking about earlier. Maybe they don't understand it. Well, maybe they think, oh yeah, that's great. I'll do that change. And then they get busy and they forget about it. And you come to your house and hey, what about soap? Like, oh, soap. I forgot the soap thing. I'm going to the market right now after the home visit. We're getting soap. So maybe it's that, maybe they're confused. Maybe the home visit was changing something about what's going on there.
Should we interpret the home visits as like an intent to treat fact where the government intended to come to visit, but if parents are not home, then how do we know whether the home visit is actually?
Yes, it's a good question. Well, I'll show you if we have time. I have some slides on both. So IPA did the survey work. They did some fidelity checks and went to a random sample of villages. Ask people, pick a random sample of households in this random sample of villages, ask them, hey, in the last month, did you get a home visit? In the last month, did you get cash? Did you get it? So the fidelity on these random spot checks looks pretty good. We also asked them at the end line, hey, how many home visits did you get? How many information meetings did you get them? And it looks good, but not perfect. So those are the two pieces of evidence that we have that I think they were getting it. If you come to your house today and you're not there, if you come tomorrow, they're in the villages for a while. So because there's 21 households that they're trying to hit in that village, so you're not going to get them all done in one day. You're there for a week or something like that. You go on to the other. So it's kind of like you'd be in that. You potentially don't get it today, but you get you tomorrow. They were also trained to go super early, right before sunrise and before they go to the fields, super late. And they did their best to try and to find these folks.
And in the same line of thought, how well attended is the information from the information?
Yeah, so I'll put up the fidelity thing. So it looked, it looked reasonable. They seemed they were going. What they learned there tells us not a whole lot.
How with the parents trust the government, because it could be that when you do home visits, they have to give good answers because they feel like they just don't they don't trust that the government is going to actually help them. What do you think?
Well, so keep in mind, right? So the home visits run by the government. The government's hiring, field workers to go do the home. We're doing the survey enumerators, and IPA is, doing the enumerators, and we're coming 15 months after all the home visits are done.
Okay.
So, I'm not that worried that they're going to lie to us 15 months after everything stopped, because everything stopped. It's done. I don't think we've got lots of problems. I'm going to be the first to admit that, but that's not our problem in this context.
I have a similar question. Is the visitor allowed to ask a specific question about certain behaviors? Or because I can see that mechanism, but it could be also just very good for monitoring, right? And I don't know how.
Right. So there's two sets of at the end line. We have a survey team. IPA. Based in the U.S. They have offices in. They have an office in Burkina. They hire the enumerators. These are university students who are doing the survey work. They're going out for a dedicated couple of weeks doing all the survey. That's 15 months after it ends. The government is providing these home visits and information. Different people, no relation, so it's a totally different setup. Okay. And then the last point, this accountability, this health worker visiting again and again over multiple months, maybe oh wow, this is really important. I ignored you the first 6 months because you just kind of just seems silly that you come and tell me to do all this stuff. But boy, you just keep coming back and saying the same thing again and again. Maybe I should do something. I don't know. Right? Limited ECD impact. Why are they limited? You know, we don't know. I mean, cash might have played a role. Maybe cash was important on the ECD. Parents need time to do these things. Opportunity cost of parenting. I'm not sure. Program fade out. I mean, the ECD literature is a small literature to begin with. These home visits are very small literature. There's a few papers, you can probably count them on one hand, that have followed up after the intervention ends. Some find, the Heckman, they get the big publication, they go back 20 years later and these kids are, miraculous, they saved the world. And everyone thinks it's the greatest thing ever, which it could be. But there's a few other papers that went back and they got nothing. And we're kind of like, we got some, but not much. And so.
But is there a way to like sort of, in a way, these home visits are like, your bread and butter public health programs where like, India does that ASHA worker program, Thailand delivers all of its sort of village level health information through the volunteer health workers program. So maybe that's also another literature to sort of benchmark these impacts. Besides just the ECD, because this is not only about ECD, right? It's about overall health and hygiene.
Yep.
And those impacts, there is a ton of studies out there from the public health side on cost effectiveness, impact, etc. So might be worth comparing these results to that. Yeah.
Yep.
And also, I mean, I think Burkina Faso even has the 2021 DHS out now, just kind of also benchmark, because they also have questions on like number of prenatal visits you had and things such as that, just to kind of like see how much of leverage is this program making over existing aspects that were put in place already in some sense, no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on that dimension, I feel like our control group is as good as any because it's in these right villages and they're getting the same environments. And but the broader literature, I think that's a really good point in terms of like how far off are do they fade out as well for these information campaigns and these community health worker programs? And, that's something we haven't looked at. We can certainly look at that.
And another thing on the mechanisms, there's something that I was alluding to earlier. In this information only group, if you have these 21 households only who are getting 20% of their income as transfers and then getting up every month.
No. There's not the 21 who are getting, right? So the 21 that we're surveying,
there's
in the village, they're running these information meetings for 25 to 30 families. There's cash transfer. There's a poverty threshold that determines who gets it in the village. And it's not just 21 getting it.
Okay, but I wonder if there is within village variation on who gets the intervention. If there is any sort of peer pressure to for the people who are getting the intervention to not act on that information or downplay it. Because my neighbors are not getting that intervention, right?
Maybe. I mean, we don't have anyone, the people we interviewed, they all got the intervention, except in the control villages where, we interview people who didn't get it. We don't have this spillover thing. We don't have any.
Can you talk more about the cash transfer component specifically? Like it fades out after 15 months. Whereas like I think in other contexts where if the government is the one providing it, usually people count on it, it's going to come again. And it's from an optical point of view, it's very hard to like take them out. After a while, was this communicated from the early on that, it was going to be a temporary cash transfer? Did people have, a good perception about the government accountability that they will deliver this for the next 15 months? And so they can sort of like plan their consumption over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, so my understanding is that all the villagers were told as a pilot project, we're doing this for 2 years. We're going to provide you, if your villages, had a kind of all the village chiefs came together for the randomization ceremony where, you picked the balls out of the bag and, you did cash only or cash information. So they knew that. And then, they knew it was supposed to be a pilot. And then the idea that the rhetoric was, at some point post-evaluation, if it was successful, it could be expanded. But there's been lots of things are tied to, will they get funding in the future? Where's the money coming from? And so I don't know that in the village, they're really counting on this money is going to go forever. They got some money. They knew it was going to go for 2 years. I think they believed it was going to go. Maybe they didn't believe it until the first cash came. But then the first cash came and they think, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I think they, probably believed it for 2 years. That'd be my sense. All right. So then this, this was kind of a big puzzle as well. Sort of why does cash information have smaller impacts than cash only on not every time, not every outcome. we're not 100% sure about, about these mechanisms, but there were some definite puzzles on, hey, if you add information to village meetings on top of cash, it actually seemed to lower the things on some dimensions. One could be, there could be some insecurity thing. The government's coming with these big vehicles and for the big information meetings, there's lots of people. There are insecurity issues in the country that might have led to some stuff. Again, we don't have a sample size to really tease this out. We've looked at the ACLID data and conflict data to see if there's stuff nearby. So it's suggestive, but it's not perfect in pinning it down. Maybe the information is being misunderstood, actually crowding out what the parents were already doing. They were doing kind of somewhat right things and they kind of got confused at the meeting, or maybe their peers told them like do something, but they didn't really understand what they're supposed to do and they did it wrong. And like, I don't know. These are really speculative on that dimension. Okay. So let me see. Let me just show you here. You were asking, these are the spot checks earlier. Did they get cash? We did 5 spot checks, fairly good, except for the September one. Things are pretty good in getting the cash. The last 2, this is the post-COVID things, kind of the insecurity issues kind of picked up here. Received the home visits over the last 2 months. The first time, about 80% are getting the home visits. In a random spot check, random households in these villages. It's not terrible. Like most of the stuff, they're getting stuff that's supposed to be. Mother group meetings, 90% are getting them. The village meetings, 100%. So like, seemed like, it wasn't perfect. Maybe the government worker missed a meeting, but it didn't look terrible given all of the, the setting we were working.
So 2 minutes.
All right. So let me skip the attrition, robustness checks, and let me, So here's I'll give you the cost numbers, and we haven't done the benefit side. So the cash was really expensive, like really, really expensive. So this is on the order of about, I think $240, $250, something like that. This is a lot of money per year per household. The information meetings and the home visits were fairly cheap, right? They were not super expensive. So this is, this is about $20 and $30 or something like that. So this is, it's not nothing, but it's on the broad spectrum of what governments and the World Bank could run in the world for finance. This is cheap. This is cheap stuff. I think the main issue in our cost is this cash, right? That's huge. That's going to die. It's 10 times larger than the other cost. So the obvious follow-up question is like, okay, what do you get if you only do home visits without cash, right? Governments generally don't like that idea. Like they really like helping poor families with cash. So that convincing them like we want to try the home visit alone is kind of a hard sell. And so that's, we think it matters, but we don't know for sure.
I guess the other thing to think about is the time frame as well, because this is medium term and, cash is overcoming an immediate boundary. So you expect it to have a short-term impact. I personally would not expect it to have a medium-term impact, whereas information I would think about differently.
Yeah, maybe. Although, we have lots of, so there's now a handful of papers looking at longer-term impacts of cash transfers. There's some, stuff in Central America, the rest of it, and they find that these things, the money stopped, and then 10 years later, we see effects. So here, money stopped, and 15 months later, we don't see.
And just to slightly understand, like when you think about the information and home visits, like prior to being provided, like how much did these households know about the topics these people were speaking about? Was it just reinforcement of information that was kind of out there and they were aware of? Or was this kind of like, wow, I never had heard about,
somewhere in between that. You can look at some of the control group means, which is probably close to your baseline level of knowledge. So they're doing some stuff they're doing more than others, some vaccination at 50%. So there's some knowledge out there. You should get your kid vaccinated, but clearly everyone's not doing it. Right. I think that's the pitch. So let me just wrap up. So integrated social safety nets, cash plus information plus home visits. We see improvements in fertility, health, and education, some improvements in early childhood development. The caveat, these are medium-term impacts, 15 months after the intervention ended. So we see these lasting effects. Cash plus information don't lead to changes in parents' behaviors and the policy implications. So home visits seem to be critical for removing these barriers to change, and suggestive evidence that these integrated social standards are more effective for the most vulnerable. Right, so the policy, so I didn't show you these heterogeneity tables, but when we split the sample by poor and non-poor, they're all poor. There's a poverty threshold to be eligible to get this intervention. But even within the poor, the really, really poor and the not quite so poor, the effects are much, much larger for the poor, much larger for the people closer to these insecurity and conflict zones. So we do see some evidence that this home visits really matter for helping the poorest of the poor. All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. I said, is there like a QR code that we need to?
Yep.
Thanks again for joining the first seminar for the semester. Next one is going to, Isaac, the next one is?
The next one is 11th of March.
Okay.
I'll send the invite to our mailing list.
Perfect.
And you'll receive the summary of today's sessions probably by this week.
Perfect. And please do share your feedback with us so that we can keep continuing improving on the seminar series.